Jay Powell and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen testify before the Senate Banking Committee. That's coming at 10 a.m. Eastern time this morning. Steve Leisman joins us right now with what investors could expect to hear. Hi, Steve.
Morning, Becky. However different the Omicron virus variant ends up being from other COVID waves, Fed Chair Jay Powell is suggesting the Fed might confront this variant in a very different way. With each wave, the Fed has so far focused on the negative effects to consumer demand and employment. But in his testimony before the Senate today, Powell raises the prospect the Fed could now address a virus wave by focusing more on the potential inflationary impacts. In his testimony, he'll say greater concerns about the virus could reduce people's willingness to work in person, which would slow progress in the labor market and intensify supply chain disruptions. Well, one way to read that is it would exacerbate the inflation problem, meaning the Fed could decide to keep tapering or even accelerate tapering in response to another wave. Citi saying in a report, Fed officials increasingly view COVID as a negative supply rather than demand shock, and to the extent this adds to other structural inflationary factors could ultimately imply more hawkish monetary policy. Powell made other comments on inflation, saying it was running well above our 2% longer run goal, saying it will linger well into next year, and that labor slack is diminishing and wages are rising at a brisk pace. In any context, all of that is pretty hawkish talk for a Fed official, let alone the chair. Now, Powell did go on to say he expects inflation to move down significantly over the next year and sees the job market and economy continuing to improve. But the chair seems very focused right now on inflation and less likely to add stimulus in response to another COVID wave. Pending more info on this new variant, tapering still seems set to go, and an acceleration can't be ruled out. Becky?
I mean, I guess that explains the futures this morning. If you thought we've seen this playback before, we know how the Fed will react. We know how the Congress will react. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe this time really is different.
I think so. I mean, it's hard for me to think that after these comments and this growing concern, remember Bostic on Friday, even after the Omicron news came out, said he still saw the possibility of an accelerated taper. So I'm not sure. I can't be sure here, but it does seem like there's a change in tack in response to the wave. Remember what we were talking about yesterday, that Fed officials have believed that the economic or the negative economic impacts from each wave has been less because we've sort of learned to live with it. And then you have this persistent inflation problem in front of you, and it may be that the Fed has decided the answer here to the next COVID wave may not be to add more stimulus, but maybe keep going and at least in removing the stimulus. And I'm not sure, because the next couple of weeks may be critical in this information. It's why I listen to all of the science squawk that goes on in doing my economic reports. You have to. But the next 2 weeks are going to be critical as to whether or not the Fed accelerates taper, keeps on going at its December 14-15 meeting.
Steve, he got the nod on the reappointment, so now he can do what he should have been doing all along without worrying about appeasing all the doves.
Yeah, you could say that, Joe, and I think there's a case to be said on that. But look, you live and you learn. There isn't a central bank playbook on fighting a virus, right? And the idea that the initial response was to attack aggregate demand or worry about aggregate demand, that seemed to make perfect sense. Whether or not there was a point in time that the Fed should have allowed the baton to pass to the fiscal side, Joe, I've been thinking this through a lot, and I'm trying to think back on what would have happened if in response to, say, President Biden's stimulus bill, the $1.9 trillion, the Fed would have tightened. It's politically very difficult for the Federal Reserve to do that, and it really gets at the political considerations that go into monetary policy.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.